Okay, so we're back. It's COMP1002. It's week 10, lesson 10, part 1. Again, it's web and internet fundamentals. I want to cover the stuff on your final, just talk about it a little bit, and discuss some strategies around what you're going to build. So let's take a look. So it's up online already on Blackboard. The due date is the last week of classes, right? So it'll be like the very last day. I think that's December 18th. Now for us, we're going to have an exam, right? So on the last day of classes, which is the exam day, right? This is when this thing is due. So looking at it, you're going to build a website based on something, either a product or service of your choice. And it says that was on the market before the internet. So something that came before the internet. Like, that's so something way old, right? Anything you want. There's all kinds of stuff, right? So think about stuff that could have existed before the internet, right? They're showing an old toaster here as an example. Like if you're looking at this toaster, Scott loves this particular toaster. Actually, he has one in his office, this exact one, and it's pretty amazing what they pack into it. So again, it's something that existed beforehand. It's a product or service, and what you're going to do is you're going to promote it with your website. Okay, now you may ask, how come we can't do something we want to do with this one? And this is the discussion I kind of had with Scott. And one of the things he was talking about was it's good to be given something, because when we go do something for a client, as an example, we don't necessarily have a choice of what we do, especially when the client has certain requirements, right? So imagine this is something that, I mean, you still have a little bit of choice because you can choose whatever, right, that you wanna talk about. There's lots of leeway here, right? But the first thing is researching a product that didn't exist. So when did the internet come out? You have to think about that. How long ago? So that's probably in the I would say probably in the 1980s, 1985 range, 1990s, something that existed before in that time frame, but doesn't that was never on the internet, and you want to promote it now. Something that comes to mind for me that there's lots of sites on this right now is, like, let's say something like as old as the Rubik's Cube, right? The Rubik's Cube existed for me. I don't know who knows what a Rubik's Cube is. Some people don't know. Hopefully everyone knows. So it's way back in the day. It was like this. It was a puzzle cube, right? That came out, and when you learn to do a Rubik's Cube back in the day, if you were one of those people. By the way, nowadays in some universities, there's all kinds of clubs and stuff about Rubik's Cube, doing, kind of speed cubing and all this kind of stuff. Back in my day, there wasn't anything like that because no one had any formulas on how to complete this thing, how to make the puzzle happen, right? You had to figure it out. And sometimes you could buy books, like these little cheater books to try and figure out how to do these little patterns or algorithms, how to complete the cube. But nowadays, it's everywhere. If you go on the website, they advertise the cube. There's different companies that have cloned it and so on. But the original Rubik's Cube, the idea behind it and everything else was, at the time, was kind of new and ingenious. And they've come up with a million different kinds now. They have one that's a mirror. They have other ones that are like, pyramid shapes, spherical, different kind of things, to kind of run behind it. But they never had a website. They never had, at the time when this thing was originally came out, it was all promoted on TV, and that's all they had back then. Now TV was pretty cool, and that's how we all found out about it, because it was kind of like the craze at the time, right? The Rubik's Cube, all the kids wanted it, but there was no internet. So imagine when you take a retro product like that, and imagine if there was no internet, how would you promote something like that, right? I'm giving you an example of something that already has something now, but didn't back then. So the product you can choose, product or service today that you can choose, can already have a website, right? But maybe didn't have one back in the day when it first came out. Okay, so it can't be so obscure. Like I can't give you something that you can't find online, right? It doesn't exist online, so I want you to put it online. That's impossible, or it's really hard for you guys to do, right? So find something that's a retro product. Again, something that I would target would be something in that time frame, 1980s, 1990s, maybe something that you don't know about, right? That you want to talk about, and you want to put online. You want to promote as a new, as a, I don't know, a reimagined product or service. You know, based on that. When I say reimagined, I always think of Battlestar Galactica, reimagined, right? You know, those kind of things, or something that's been kind of redone again. A remake. There we go. That's what I want you to think about. A remake of a retro product that came out back in the day. All right. So once you got your product or service, right, as an example, and you've got some time to get this thing done. This is like a 4-week project, right? You're getting it today, officially week 10. Had it last week. From a planning perspective, I wanted to give it to you, but you've got a few weeks to put something together. So there's some different pages that we need from you, right? So a page around promotional details. It can fall into those brackets. So like products, services, you know, support. If you had a product like, let's say, the Rubik's Cube and it broke, you know, how would you get support for that? Are there replacement parts? And actually, for the new speed cubes that they have right now, the speed cubes actually have faces that you could take off and put back. All kinds of crazy stuff that they've come up with. I know, it's crazy. You know, it's for some people it's really interesting. Other people, they're bored out of their mind when I talk about this stuff. But if I was to look it up, if I said speed cube, and there's tons of them out there, right? So here's Speed Cube Shop, right? And like there's all kinds out there that you can download or buy, and there's different kinds. Like you see, there's all kinds of puzzle cubes that are out there right now, and there's different cubes that you, like I said, have they have different qualities, and they're all like, you know, in the you know, the under $50 range that you can buy, and you can compete. Some of them are like $10. You can also have like custom cubes and everything else. But here's an example of something that, you know, came from this retro product idea, and they came up with a, you know, everything that you can think of for cubes: stickers, lubricant, accessories. It's nuts, right? Like it's for a cube, it's for a GameCube, man, and they've come up with everything out of the blue. Other products that I can think of mine is a series of books, like, for example, Dungeons and Dragons. I know it sounds crazy, but back in the day, in the 70s, when I first started playing, I know it's crazy. I'm definitely dating myself.
What? You were one?
Yeah. No, I was not. Right? Back in the late 70s, all right, after Star Wars came out, 1977. Thank you very much. Right? I was. We were already into doing things like, you know, role playing of different kinds of things. We started playing with tabletop games, but back in the day there was no Dungeons and Dragons. So if I was to look up something like Dungeons and Dragons, now of course there's a whole website, dndwizards.com. They also do things like Magic the Gathering and all this kind of stuff. They have products and services and everything else on a game that had come out, you know, back in the day. Right? Back in the day we didn't have anything like that. There was no website for Dungeons and Dragons. We were all a group of geeky gamers, right? That we went to the local store in the corner, and you know, hopefully they had the latest book, right? You couldn't download it, right, and steal it from the web. Like, there was no PDFs back then. Thank God, that was good. If you bought miniatures, they were made of lead, and they probably would kill you, right? That's how it was. But now they have every product, and the product has been kind of put through its paces a bunch of times. Now we're at version 5, yeah, version 5, and it's not bad. They keep on coming up with different iterations. And of course, the company's been sold. Originally it was TSR, and it was sold to Wizards of the Coast, who took it over. And of course, Wizards of the Coast, if I go to wizards.com, they actually have other products like Magic the Gathering, like I said, and a bunch of other kind of games, right? Even Magic at the time, way back in the day, and this is, again, I mean, in the 90s, they didn't have a website, right? And for people who don't know what Magic is a trading card game. it was very, very popular back in the day. And again, the reason why is because you could play it in a very short time. Dungeons and Dragons take you like, 8 hours to play a game, between 4 and 8 hours, right? At least if you don't play 8 hours, then, it sucks because, you do one battle and it's done because the battle's going to take you like an hour, right? At the minimum, right? And whereas Magic, you can have a quick game of Magic with your buddy. You can get together with Keith. He can have his deck. I have my deck. We play against each other, right? And then we're done. I go over to the next guy. I'll play the guys in the back there, right? Because they got a better deck than me. I'm just saying. But there was no internet for that. There wasn't anything to download. You didn't have forums to communicate with other users of whatever the product or service was at the time for this kind of stuff. You just had to find, go to your local store and talk to other people and trade with them, right? And occasionally try and, buy big enough cards to kill the other people, right? So the idea is it was competitive back then. Nowadays, it's a big industry. Magic was, I guess, the first real true trading card game that was out there, right? So again, here's another product that was a retro product. And now it's so mainstream, like everybody plays it, and there's a million different copies of it. Stuff in Japan. They've got a whole new system of cards that are very like Magic, but are not Magic, right? And I mean, everyone's done card games now. There's all kinds. There's Star Wars cards games. There's card games with Road Wars. There's card games with I can just think of it. It's probably there, right? Lord of the Rings, right? I can think of anything. So there's another one. I'm just trying to think of these hobbies that were back, that they've never had any kind of websites. Another big one was Warhammer. Warhammer was kind of came out later on. It wasn't as big, but if I go Warhammer 40K, I get another kind of hobby that I can think of that never had a website back in the day. Now it's crazy. Now you can buy models. These models here are all made by hand. Like you assemble them by hand, glue them together. Polish them up, prime them, paint them, base them. It's massive. It's crazy. This hobby it's one of those hobbies that eat you up, right? You can spend hours just modeling without ever playing the game, right? There's different aspects. There's people who are great at painting the models, people who are good at basing the models. Like, it's nuts how crazy this stuff is. And these are the things that started off with no website. I'm giving you some ideas of maybe some place to go if you're going to come up with, and I'm thinking about board games and different things like that appeal to me, but certainly you can find out about things that are interesting to you, right? So research a product. The idea is research a product that didn't exist before on the internet, and then with these 5 pages as an example, some kind of an about page, some kind of support service page. Product details, different kind of promotional details on your landing page, all that kind of stuff is what you want to put together. So again, it says point 4 is construct the above pages into well-formed, valid HTML. Decide on an appropriate file, folder, naming strategy. We've talked about that throughout this course. What your structure should be, your file structure, which is really, really important, and keeping organized. It says each page should have an unordered list of links to provide consistent global navigation, so navigation on the site, right? Optimize all graphics and design elements for quick downloads. So don't make it so that it's the wrong kind of graphic. Don't put TIFFs on the website. It would just be insane. It just wouldn't load. Use appropriate HTML elements to structure your content. Construct an external CSS file. Thank God for that. And be sure to comment all your code where appropriate. Format your code so that it's easy to read and maintain, and have someone proofread your completed site for spelling and grammar. It's interesting. Some of the stuff I've looked at from you guys, there's some issues, but for the most part, you guys are right on with what I've asked you to do, right? Marks are coming. They are, I swear. Taking it further, attempt some interesting layout effect with CSS, and we're going to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. Integrate interactive CSS-based navigation. They suggest something like suckerfish, this different kind of navigation. We're also going to talk about other ways of doing that. Attempt to apply some a simple JavaScript-powered interaction. We'll talk about that. Hopefully I can start it today. And include a simple contact or add to cart form. Now, the form does not have to work, okay? Because you don't know any back-end technologies, theoretically. If you make it work, I'll definitely give you bonus marks. If you make a PHP page that works, if you know PHP, that's great. But I don't think I'll have time to get around to that in this course, PHP. I may get around to, I want to try and get to JavaScript, which is kind of the meat and bones of the internet these days. And again, think about this product. You have to be passionate about what you're making, okay? So don't just pick a product because I'm telling you, don't pick Warhammer because I'm telling you Warhammer or Magic or one of those. It's got to speak to you, this product, right? So think about something that, you know, that doesn't exist. Some people, I know I've seen other classes where they've done things like they have a selection of skateboards. Serious, no joke. Some guy came out with like this whole website on skateboards because he was in love with these. I forget what the company was called. There's special skateboards that they made that had different designs and everything else. I know some people came up with guitars. Like there was a guitar site that they came up with. Good back in the day, they didn't have sites on guitars, and it was I think they chose Fender was what the main one was. Now they have sites like that today. It's not like you can go and look up some you know, some of these sites with the products that didn't exist today. That now they have products. But you can certainly find stuff that's out there that gives you all kinds of information, but it's got to be your own. Please don't try and copy a site that's already in existence.
When we're doing this site, are you looking for it to be as if it was from the 80s, 70s?
No, imagine, no, I mean, you can make it retro if you like, but it's not really the retro site you're making necessarily. You want to make it so that you choose a retro product, something that existed back in the day and that you're promoting today. Now, for some of you, because you guys are young, right? Sorry, Keith.
No, I'm young.
But for some of you, right? You know, the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s are like another universe, right? That doesn't exist, almost like a parallel universe that you don't know anything about, right? And that's okay, right? I mean, if it's got to be something that's, you know, that again before the internet, right? So when I say before, like 1980s, 1990s. That's when the internet started firing off, around 1995, I would say, would be that time, right? So where things started to get going, when people had websites. Before that, we had the internet, but it wasn't, it was just purely for academic uses. That was what it was. We didn't have, like I said, there wasn't like, you know, CSS images and all that kind of stuff that we have today. So think about it. What existed before? Even things like, you know, no joke, some IBM machines, you know, like someone came up with this whole idea of, you know, he was promoting, you know, computers, right? Because back in the day, there were some computers that, you know, we didn't have internet back then to promote computers, right? So he came up with a whole site on that. So really, if you think about it, the sky's the limit on this one, right? I mean, you can think about a product you like, something that existed before your time, most likely, and that you want to talk about today. Yeah. As far back as you want. If you want to go 1920s, if you want to go back into the 1800s, you can go do that, right? You want to promote about, you know, promote the, you know, a series of hat collections that gunslingers used in the Wild West. Go ahead, man, right? I mean, it's really about promotion and make it convincing, make it realistic. Don't just choose a product and say, you know, I'm putting this on the internet because my project, my final project for the class. It's got to be something that you're passionate about, okay? Otherwise, it'll come out like you're not passionate about it. And what happens if you're not passionate about anything? Because sometimes people aren't, right? That's okay. Pick something that, I mean, you're semi-passionate about. How about that? And that you want to put together. Any questions around this? This is due like the last day of classes. This is December 18th, if I'm not wrong, when this is due at midnight. Okay, so you got lots of time. But sometimes when you get lots of time like this, what ends up happening is, you know, it's like giving you lots of rope, you know, that you can hang yourself with. Please don't wait till the last minute. I want to follow up with you on this one. So I've given it to you today. It's week 10, right? Officially you had it last week. Next week, I want to follow up and see where you're at with it, right? So I want to get some feedback and some almost like a progress report over time, because it's 25% of your mark, right? This thing. So this could sink you. Like if you don't do this final one, even if you're really good at the other stuff, it's pretty heavy duty, right? So I don't want you to be negatively affected. Now there's a series of criteria that that Scott's put together here for us to take a look on what you're being ranked on. It's the little rubric here that he's included. So I mean, some of this is going to be the stuff that I'll be looking at. How about if it's not pretty? Someone asked me one time when we did this kind of course. They said, Tom, I'm not an artist. I'm not a designer. What if it's not pretty but it's functional, right? Well, you get 4 weeks to make it pretty, right? So it's like I need you to make it as pretty as you can make it. And we're going to talk about ways and methods. What about things like if you don't want to use your own CSS? Like someone said, can I use Bootstrap? Right? I got the question right. It's really your stuff that you should be using. Yes, we could talk about frameworks, but that kind of defeats the purpose of what this course is all about, understanding how to put it all together for yourself. But what about things like if you want to use Font Awesome or something like that? That I would agree on. If you want to use Font Awesome, if you want to use a web font like from Google Fonts or something like that, you could definitely use that. But please don't use a CSS framework like Bootstrap or Foundation. That would be bad, right? Because that means that it's not you, right? I'd like you to try and make it work on your own. This is kind of a project, a learning project. It's not to put something together to, just because you want to make it pretty. You got to make it pretty, but with your own knowledge and learn about it, right? So it's an opportunity for you guys to really dig in and use the stuff that you've learned. And actually try and stretch yourself a little bit with some of the other things. Now, there is no page requirement. That's one of the things that you can notice here. There's only like these 5 pages that they talk about. So you could add multiple additional pages here. I would say the minimum here that I would be looking for is these, like, the typical 5 or 6 pages that I would ask for. Product, services, about us, contact us, those kind of things. In a home page, some kind of landing page, right? So it's not like I wouldn't ask for anything less than that in this particular example, right? But there is no actual thing that says you need to make the products. Every product has to have its own page. I'm not saying that at all. It could be one product that you're really talking about, right? So example here, Scott's kind of highlighted the toaster, so that's the product, right? And it would be all about this toaster. So for inspiration, and I think I've probably showed you this before, but the award site is always a good place for inspiration. And there's a site called Awards with 3 W's, like for www, right? And if you go there, these sites here, what they've done is they've ranked these sites. People submit their sites here for almost like ranking, right? And some of them are really cool. Some of them aren't so great. But if you click on some of these, you can see some of the common themes for the sites. If I click this one, I don't even know what this one's about, but you can see how people on the web have ranked it. This one's from France, right? And if you want to look at the website, you can certainly click into there, and it'll take you right to the website. And it's obviously promoting some kind of product. In this particular case, a set of headphones, it looks like, right? And for for different prices. Notice some of the trends that are happening on the web today. And you can try and mimic them with the stuff that you know. I mean, there's going to be gaps in your knowledge that you won't be able to use all this stuff, but things like large images that stretch across the page. That's kind of a common theme these days in terms of a more modern design. Large type, large text, on your page. You want it to be not too cluttered with content in terms of copy. On the front page, a lot of times, especially on promotional sites, you see a lot more of this kind of stuff happening where the product speaks for itself, right? The product image is beautiful enough so that you don't really need a lot of type, right? A lot of copy at all, right? So that's the kind of stuff where you can see how they lay things out. You can compare. You can take the best of the sites that you see out there, and that's why this project needs maybe a little bit of research, right? A little bit of time looking at, first of all, understanding what the product is going to be, and then how you're going to lay it out. What are your thoughts about laying out this product and producing a page, your main landing page for it? So again, there's a lot of directions you can go on this one, and sometimes I worry when you have that much choice, especially if you don't have a lot of ideas. If you take a look at some of the winners, you can see why they win. As an example, some of them there's a lot of interactivity, but you can see again how a lot of these pages are bold. They've got a lot of some common theming, like large panels. All of them are responsive. Most of them have responsive design methodologies built in. We're going to talk about responsive design before the end, that's for sure. And all kinds of other things that are out there that you can certainly go to and look for inspiration. I'll tell you, I don't expect you to do a page like of this quality. I'm showing you some pages so you can get some inspiration. In real life, when I have a product that I have to promote for a client, and I kind of showed you that page one. Remember that web project page that I showed you, several weeks ago, right? Where I kind of said one of the things I do is market research for the clients, right? I look at their industry. So if I'm promoting things like, games or whatever, I look at whatever I'm promoting and I compare it to other websites that already exist, for the client. And sometimes the client also has an idea of what they want to build because they know who their competitors are, right? They know like if they're in an industry, they have like 5 or 6 different people that they're competing in their local industry or more, right? So where do they sit from a marketing perspective in the industry? Where do they zero in? And so we look at other examples of what they do, and they kind of say, well, I like this. I like what they did here on their website. This my competitor. Could you include something like that for me, right? And sometimes it fits, and sometimes it won't because of the type of product or the differentiation between their product and their competitor's product, right? So in the same vein, what I'm asking you to do is take a look at something that works for you, right? And you can search for things on this awards website. Like for example, something like if I say retro, just to say, my top of my mind, you might be able to see something that makes sense to you, right? For what they're promoting, right? And there's a lot of different kinds of sites here. Everything from like marketing for bands, all kinds of stuff. One thing I also want you to do is think about a logo for your website or for yourself, right? We really don't have a portfolio site, that you guys have kind of developed yet. Eventually, you're going to get to that. You should probably, if you don't have a portfolio site already, you should start building one, like, on the side, apart from school stuff. If this is what you want to do, if you want to do web development, even if you want to promote yourself as a software developer nowadays, it's good to have a portfolio site of your projects that you can show someone who's going to interview you for a job. It's good to do that. So this could turn out to be, one of the pieces that you built that you want to show off. So make it something that's fun and that makes sense for you, right? So when you build up your portfolio of stuff, right? You want to target things that you care about, and a lot of times what I ask people to do is build up some kind of logo, right? So again, people don't have any idea how to make a logo, and a lot of you guys aren't designers or whatever, and you're like, so what do I do? Just put my first initial and my last name and then put a circle around it? Is that good enough, Tom? It's better than nothing, right? And it's better than having a site that has no marker on it whatsoever, right? So think about this as this company you're making, even though you're promoting a product, example, the Rubik's Cube or one of the other products I talked about today, right? You need some kind of logo, and if you want some ideas, there's some really good places to go. You can go to Logo Lounge, logolounge.com. They talk about logos and some modern design for logos, things like what's kind of popular now with logos. If you actually look through it, they have all kinds of articles on different logos, right? Like that you can certainly look through to get ideas of how to get things done. Sometimes what people do is in past courses is they kind of smash together a couple of logo ideas they've seen in different places, right? And I want to see something that current logo trends. So here's 2015, the Logo Lounge Trend Report. This is pretty cool, where they talk about some cool trends in logo design, right? That you can put together, and they don't look that difficult, but actually they're quite interesting how they put them together. So something that represents you. So that's what I want to see on your website. So even though you're promoting your product and service, this logo is for you, right? So maybe something that you're going to use in future courses when you kind of promote some kind of product, because you're going to have other web courses here at Georgia. All right. So think about that you can add in, and there's some very common themes, and they talk about how you can design stuff. So again, if you're not a big designer, you know, again, I don't expect you to go too much into it. There isn't anything in the specs for your project that tell you have to have a logo, but it would be nice. And you know, and if you work on something that makes sense, like again, you're building a brand, if you will, right? So make it something that represents you. Yes.
Two-parter. First off, on the syllabus it shows that we have 2 tests only. So is this in place of a final test? Because on your syllabus last week shows test 2, which we've already written.
Let me go back.
And then the second part is, can assignment 4 be a building block using the same product and everything else for the final?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So let's go into. I like your questions. So remember what the syllabus is saying, and I've actually added, right? Because we had a little quiz in between too, right? So, and I've tried to reduce. Let me explain what these things mean. So it's good questions. First, I'll address the syllabus piece. So even though it says test 1 and test 2, notice these test 1 and test 2s are final exams. So midterm would have been test 1, and then you would have test 2, which is the final exam, right? You have your 4 assignments in your project, right? So all these are out of 10, right? But what I've actually done is I've removed some, you know, a little piece of the test, as an example, from test 1. And remember, we had a mini test around week 4, which was quiz 1, right? I have another one that's planned, quiz 2, which is planned next week, right? But that quiz is like, what, 5%? Like we're talking about just based on the last few weeks of work, the stuff on your box model, you know, the different style sheets, things like that. It's only on that we're gonna test on. And then your final test, which is test 2, the official test 2, will be on the stuff we cover from about week 11 until the end. So I break it up. I'm breaking it up a little bit, Keith. So I don't want to make this with a big test at the end. So it's not going to be weighed very heavily, right? So if I take 5% of that, it'll be worth like 7.25% at the end. So something smaller. It's still the same amount of marks. I'm just testing you more often. That's all. So that's one. And in the when it comes to assignment 4, if I go back to assignment 4 for a second, which is the last assignment that I've given you. And again, it's all about wayfinding and with lists and navigation. I mean, it says using the supply taxonomy, and see below, right, which is your about navigation and so on. And then, you know, taken from the Weather Network. These are all the taxonomy that we're talking about. Build an HTML5 compliant unordered list of hyperlinks that reflects the hierarchy, right? And design a single HTML page template to contain the navigation. So this is a totally different project, right? So that's why it's not easy for us to use it as a jump off point from assignment 4 to the final, right? This is almost like a way of building your knowledge around linking lists, because it's all around lists. How do I put together a list? That's what this assignment's all about, and also navigation, right? So, of course, also the box model, which we're talking about. We've been talking about over the last couple weeks, right? Which I'm going to talk about again today. I'm talking about it over and over again because the box model is almost like the central point of all our CSS that we do. I'd like to talk about Flexbox, but I can't get to it. I'll be honest with you, I probably won't be able to get to it in this course. But that's the stuff that we talk about, the box model all the time, right? So, and you also had a lab that was due, right, around the box model and CSS last day, right? So when it would have been due today, right? The lab number 6, I think, is what we gave you. So I don't know if that answered your question, but basically your new project, in this last 10 weeks are going to be, or last 4 weeks are going to be from week 10 on, is all going to be on this retro product that you're going to make, that you're going to kind of research, right? This one again would be due next week. This assignment number 4, right? So assignment 4 is due next week by Friday, right? Midnight, and the project is due, like I said, week 14. Any questions around the project? Concerns or anything like that? I know I've had requests in the past. Can I work with somebody else? If I was going to work with somebody else, you know, in a group, right? I'm okay with that. You can work with one other person if you want to. So this isn't a project you don't have to do on your own. It's something you can work together with somebody else on, right? Even though it doesn't say group project on this one for the final, if you want to work with one other person to create your fantastic site, I would be willing to accept that. Okay, so it doesn't have to be an individual project for this one, right? You've done up to this point, you would have done 4 individual assignments, right? Which is 40% of your mark. And I don't mind if you work with somebody else. Sometimes partner programming is really cool in terms of putting together something, you know, for your final that's pretty decent. So if you're interested in working with somebody else, please let me know by next week. Okay, so next week, what I'm going to be looking for you for your final project is a little bit of a plan. All right, so I'm going to ask you about that. I may have even another little lab around what's your concept. All right, so be prepared to talk about your final project or even an idea of what you're going to be doing next week. Okay, so next week, Friday, right, is what we're going to be talking about. Again, any questions around this stuff? So again, I'm letting you work with somebody else because I know there's lots of other stuff you guys got going on, not just this course, right? And a lot of times it makes it a little bit more straightforward when you partner up with somebody else to produce something, especially if it could be something that's pretty cool. You can come up with something that's in your portfolio. Okay, I'm going to stop recording this one. So this is all around final project, this recording, and then we'll get back into the other stuff when I come back.